"I'm pregnant," she said quietly, her hands trembling as they rested on the small cafe table between us, the steam from my untouched coffee curling upward like it already knew. This moment would change everything, and for a second I thought she was joking. Not because it was funny, but because my mind refused to accept it, refused to move forward, refused to let the past crash into the present all at once. But then I saw her eyes, red, exhausted, scared, and I knew this wasn't a joke. This was real, and before I could even find my breath, before I could ask a single question, she added in a broken whisper, "He left me." And suddenly the noise of the cafe faded, replaced by the sound of my own, a heartbeat pounding in my ears as memories rushed. In late nights, shared laughs, promises that felt permanent back then, and the slow drifting apart that neither of us ever truly talked about. She wasn't supposed to be back in my life like this, not after everything, not after I had rebuilt myself piece by piece as a single dad, raising my daughter alone, learning how to pack lunches, braid hair, survive sleepless nights and silent fears without anyone to lean on. And yet here she was, carrying a child that wasn't mine, abandoned by a man who vanished the moment responsibility knocked, and she looked at me like I was her last safe place, like I was the only one who wouldn't turn away. And maybe that scared me more than anything, because I knew what it felt like to be left, to be holding a future you didn't plan for while someone else ran from it. And when she finally asked, "What should I do?" I didn't answer right away, because the world had taught me that loud reactions only make wounds deeper. And instead I thought of my daughter sleeping at home, of the nights I cried silently so she wouldn't hear, of the way life had broken me and then dared me to stand back up. And when I finally spoke, my voice was calm, almost too calm for the storm in her eyes, and I said, "Sit down, breathe. You don't have to decide everything today." And that was it. No anger, no judgment, no lectures, just quiet steadiness. And she started crying, really crying, like someone who had been holding herself together for too long. And in that moment, she didn't need a hero. She needed someone who wouldn't disappear. Someone who knew that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stays. And as the chapter of that day closed, neither of us knew that those few quiet words would ripple outward, changing more lives than either of us could imagine. And if you're feeling the weight of this story already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next proves that silence can be more powerful than any argument. Days passed, then weeks, and her world didn't magically fix itself. But something shifted. She stopped apologizing for existing, stopped flinching every time her phone buzzed, and started showing up to doctor appointments alone, yet stronger. While I watched from a respectful distance, never crossing a line, never offering more than what was asked, and people misunderstood that, whispered that I was too involved or trying to save her. But they didn't see the truth. I wasn't rescuing anyone. I was simply refusing to add more abandonment to a world already drowning in it. And one evening, as my daughter colored quietly at the kitchen table, she asked me, "Daddy, why does that lady cry?" And I knelt beside her and said, "Because sometimes grown-ups are scared, just like kids." And she nodded like that made perfect sense, and maybe it did, because children understand empathy better than adults ever do. And when the baby was born, months later, healthy and loud and very much alive, I didn't step forward to claim something that wasn't mine. But I didn't step away either, and that confused everyone, especially the man who suddenly returned with excuses and empty apologies when he realized what he'd lost. But the quiet reply he received, "This child already has stability. Don't bring chaos back," ended the conversation more effectively than any fight could have. And she watched that moment unfold with new eyes, realizing that love isn't always about romance. Sometimes it's about consistency, about who shows up when it's inconvenient. And over time, she rebuilt her life, found her own strength, and thanked me not for staying, but for not trying to own her pain. And years later, when people asked how everything changed, how heartbreak turned into healing, the answer was never dramatic. It was just one calm voice in the storm, one man who had already learned that leaving is easy, but staying with dignity is rare. And that quiet reply echoed forward, shaping futures, teaching children what real character looks like. So if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that strength doesn't always shout, subscribe to the channel now, because the next story might be the one that changes the way you see life forever. Life didn't turn gentle overnight, but it became honest. And honesty has a strange way of healing what drama only reopens. Because as the months rolled into years, the child grew, first steps, first words, first laughter, and every milestone reminded everyone watching that abandonment leaves scars, but presence rewrites destinies. And though I never called myself his father, I was there in the quiet ways that matter most, fixing toys at midnight, holding fevers through long nights, showing him how to tie his shoes, while my daughter showed him how to be brave. And the woman who once arrived at that cafe, shaking with fear, slowly transformed into someone unrecognizable, someone who stood straighter, spoke clearer, and no longer begged for love that required her to shrink. And one afternoon, she finally said what had been sitting between us for years. "You never asked for anything in return. Why?" And I smiled because the answer was simple and heavy all at once. Because someone once left me when I needed them. And I promised myself I'd never be that person. And those words landed harder than any confession, because they revealed the truth people often miss, that real strength doesn't demand credit. It doesn't post receipts. It doesn't need applause. It just keeps showing up. And when the man who left finally tried again to rewrite history, claiming change and regret, the child looked at him with curiosity, but not attachment. Because children know who stayed when it was hard. And in that moment, the woman realized the greatest gift she had received wasn't rescue, romance, or revenge. It was dignity returned. Quietly, patiently, without conditions. And as life continued forward, separate but deeply connected, she built her own future. I raised my children with steady hands and a clear conscience. And the story people once whispered about became a lesson told softly, that walking away is loud but empty, while staying silent and steady can change everything. And if you're listening to this right now, feeling broken, abandoned, or unsure, remember, sometimes the reply that saves a life isn't dramatic. It's simply calm, consistent, and kind. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because more real, powerful stories like this are coming, and the next one might speak directly to your soul.